Just because someone becomes a primary caregiver for their loved one who has cancer doesn't mean that they can stop working. And in fact, a lot of people who have cancer can't stop working while they go through treatment. As I've established before, my parents ran a family dental practice. My dad was a dentist and my mom was a front office manager. And they relied upon that practice for all of their income and then also their insurance coverage. When my mom was initially diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, there was never even a thought that my dad would stop working to dedicate more time to her. And even my mom kept working initially through her entire regimen of RCHOP. However, when the cancer metastasized to her brain and spinal cord, and I came home to be a primary caregiver for her, that's when she stopped working and I took over her role. Very few people can just halt their life and their responsibilities when they are faced with a medical crisis. Working while going through cancer treatment and working while being a caregiver for a loved one who's going through cancer treatment is kind of an inevitability given the structure of our medical system in the United States. I worked throughout almost the entirety of my cancer treatment with the exception of my stem cell transplant and the immediate months following my stem cell transplant when I was recovering. During that time, I was on a medical leave from work, so I was still covered by my insurance, and I was fortunate to live in California because the state has a really robust disability assistance program, so I would get a portion of my wages during that period when I wasn't able to work due to the impact of the stem cell transplant. Needless to say, I could spend an entire video talking about working while going through cancer treatment, but this video will focus on working while being a caregiver for someone who's going through cancer treatment. When you don't work from home, or when you do work from home, but your loved one is going through inpatient treatment at a hospital, there is going to be physical separation for a period of time throughout the day. That can lead to a lot of challenges. The first one is obvious. When you're not physically with your loved one, you can't be there to assist them if they need your help. And depending on what's going on, you might have to drop everything you're doing at work to go be with them, or call in reinforcements, someone who isn't working during that time to be with them. And when you're not with that person, you don't have the vantage point that you can just clearly assess what's happening and what they need. You might be just getting a jarbled mess of messages or a voicemail or a call that was kind of incoherent. And you have to determine if you have to leap into action in that moment and respond, or just support from afar and hope for the best. The what if perpetuates this constant fear whenever you're away from your loved one that something bad is going to happen. And that's really hard to escape when you're working because you just don't know what message you're going to get, especially if they're going through a significant treatment at that moment. So you're just kind of waiting on pins and needles to get a message that says, I'm okay. And as you're waiting for that message, all you're thinking about is, I'm going to get a message that they're going to say that I'm doing terrible, something horrible went wrong, and you need to help me. In the case of my mom, who was going through her stem cell transplant hospitalization in Omaha, Nebraska, which was 5 hours away from Wichita, Kansas, where my dad and I were working, we felt even more powerless because we couldn't spring into action even if we wanted to. That mental stress and strain and anxiety has an impact on your work. And of course it's going to be negative. You can't imagine that a caregiver whose loved one's going through aggressive forms of cancer treatment is going to be performing at their peak ability. But that has ramifications. It's one thing when you have a family dental practice and myself or my dad could never get fired from that practice for doing poor work. But many people don't have that luxury. They work for other people. And if they are not performing well and they do have to suspend their duties often to go and help their loved one, they might be on the line to get fired. And that could jeopardize the insurance coverage for the person who's actually going through the treatment, which adds even more pressure to the caregiver. What ends up unfolding is this tug of war for your time and energy and capacity and focus. And depending on what's going on in your loved one's treatment, your work is oftentimes going to be on that losing side of that rope. But you have to still keep holding on to some degree because things could fall apart even more if you, say, lose your job. Once again, the healthcare system in this country just adds so much more stress onto the person who's going through a medical crisis and all of their loved ones. It's crazy. Now, there can be a benefit to working while being a caregiver. In those moments when your loved one is not going through treatment or they're going through a recovery period or their risk level is just not particularly high, when you go to work, you can just focus on completing tasks in a way that you can't when you're navigating a medical crisis and your loved one is going through cancer treatment. You have control over creating a spreadsheet to the fidelity that you need it to be. You do not have control over whether or not the cancer treatment your loved one is going through is going to be successful and they're going to achieve a permanent remission. And it can give you a much needed break from the person that you're caring for, because when you are surrounded by someone 24/7, it can be challenging and you can get annoyed even when they're suffering, and you know rationally that you shouldn't be getting annoyed, but it does still happen. So taking those breaks can be so important, because when you come back to them, you're refreshed, you're renewed, you want to spend time with them in a way that when you're just overtaxed and oversaturated with the amount of care that you have to provide, you just can't muster up. As they say, distance makes the heart grow fonder. So working while being a caregiver can be good, but most of the time it's not great. The next video I'll be releasing will be on July 21st, and I'll be talking about the perception of your appearance while you're going through cancer treatment. So hit subscribe, leave any questions in the comments. The link to the book is in the description, and stay tuned.